And you never owned in Ohio, right? Because you had left.
No, no, I never owned Ohio.
So Gil and I had the two different houses in Ohio. And, Dan had bought the one that we lived in on Miller Street in Fremont. Ohio was an attorney state. I think it still is an attorney state. And I wasn't doing real estate at the time. So none of this conversation made any sense. It just was what it was.
Welcome to Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy, a real estate podcast with the goal to educate, inform, and save their listeners time as they navigate the market and properties in their neighborhoods. Get ready to join real-life siblings and professional real estate advisors, Donna Reed and Eric Seemann, as they discuss how it may be simple, but it ain't always easy.
Every time I think about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy, a real estate podcast that just ain't typical. I'm Donna, he's Eric, and we are the Real Siblings. We are both professional realtors with Keller Williams. And just so you know, we're going to talk about numbers. He's way more into numbers than I am, Mr. Researcher. This podcast blends lifestyle together with real estate as we work to communicate, educate, connect, and entertain our listeners. While the topics vary and our conversations always go in many directions, we do work to provide our listeners with insights into the industry, better equipping them for their next real estate transaction. The last couple episodes, we've had a whole lot of lifestyle. Today, Eric, what are you going to teach us about?
It is Markets on the 8th.
Woo!
This is our sixth Market on the 8th, and that's significant because
That's 48.
That means this is episode 48. That means that we have produced consistently for 2 years, 2 episodes a month. That means that we are wrapping up our second full year of production of this podcast. And we publish twice a month on what days? Just to remind everybody. Do you remember?
Yes, on the 16th and the 28th, because Eric happens to have a birthday on the 16th, and I happen to have a birthday on the 28th. And so that is the one way we seem to kind of remember.
And we both get to celebrate next month since we were both June babies, right?
June. Woo-woo. Oh, I'm getting older. Thanks for that reminder.
Those little things that mean so much.
Yeah.
And of course, that means if this is 48, the next episode, 49, just to stick with the whole numbers theme, is the start of our third production year.
That's true, because we started this in the summer at a family reunion. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say time flies. Does it feel like that?
I don't feel like time makes any sense to me at all in the last couple of years. I'll just say the other day, and it might have been 2019, so yeah. So let's talk numbers, Eric.
Yeah, let's talk numbers. We got a lot to say. This is Markets on the 8th, and since it's summer, I'm using a really bad cliche, but the markets have got to be heating up.
But
Oh, you were supposed to groan in there. You didn't read the script.
No, I did. I was like, okay, whatever.
All right. So for this episode, we both are realtors, which means we're both part of the National Association of Realtors, which means that we get a 4 times, once a quarter publication through the National Association called Realtors Magazine. And in winter 2024, there was an article that was written by Melissa Dittman Tracy. It was presented in a, hey, you need to be aware of, these are the states where it's most expensive, most dollars needed for buyers to close. And supposedly it was ranked on all 50 states. But the article that was published to us in our magazine only had the top 5 most expensive states and the 5 lowest. We were missing 40 states. So since neither Arizona or Texas were part of that, it's like, well, where do we fit into this grand scheme of how expensive we are.
Yeah.
Turns out, in the way they compiled the data, in regards to closing costs, Texas was number 12. Where was Arizona on the list?
36, I think it was when I glanced at it.
36 is where you ended up with Kansas. Where was Arizona?
Oh, like 12. I don't know.
No, Texas was 12.
Okay, look, well,
26, not 36,
oh,
26.
Okay.
Okay, and that is in terms of dollars.
Right.
And so New York was number one. And for anybody who hears about how expensive real estate is in New York, you're going to go, oh, no big surprise.
Right.
Obviously, you're buying, it's going to be the most expensive place to close as well.
Right.
The New York average closing costs across the state was listed at just over $8,000 in a transaction.
And what were those closing costs, Eric? What are some of the fixed ones that are the same in every state that we?
And that's what I found about this report when I actually got the link to where the author got her data.
Right.
It was a compilation of those things that go into buyers closing in a transaction. Right. So up front, we could say, look, what's part of the cost to the buyer? Down payment.
Yep.
And of course, that down payment is based on
sale price,
purchase price, sale price, and how they're going to finance. So there's a swing in there. We all know that if you're a veteran, you can do it for no money down.
Right.
And your funding fee, which is part of the process there, can get rolled into the loan. Right. And that's what most veterans do. Yep. Many veterans, that's what they do. It's like, hey, 100%, don't have to bring anything in.
Yep.
And they hope that if they get orders to move in a year, that they can recoup their costs.
Right. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Yep.
And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But then after that, the next thing they looked at are those other fees that are associated with a real estate transaction. So in this case, from our standpoint, Donna, and I know we talked about it beforehand, commonly referred to as the prepaids.
Right. Right.
And prepaids are some sort of prorated monies that are required if you're seeking lending, because it changes if you're
paying cash,
doing a cash transaction.
Yep.
But they're going to collect insurance, they're going to collect taxes, and they're going to collect HOA fees, right?
Correct. Yep.
And insurance, what do you advise your clients?
So they know that they're going to prepay for an entire year of insurance, and then they are going to have 2 months, I believe, of insurance. And some of the HOAs, it's 4 months. I'm not even sure if it's the same for all of the homeowners association.
It's certainly not here. The owners associations are so completely random.
Right. And you might have a buy-in to the association on top of the monthly amounts. So some of our 55 plus active adult communities, it might be $500, it might be $3,000 to buy in. And that is 99.9% of the time the cost for the buyer. That's on top of their other fees. So
in addition to that, one of the ones that HOAs recently came up with, because the Texas legislature met in a previous session and said, you know what, these fees are getting out of control. We're going to cap how much they can be for a resale packet. So if a community is a new community that is still in development, in addition to the resale packet, in addition to the transfer fees, in addition to any kind of prorated fees, there's what they call a community improvement fee.
Yes.
Which is a percentage of the transaction. So that can be the single largest piece that gets held for the opportunity to join an HOA.
Yeah. And do you have a separate HOA document in Texas? Because we do. Yes.
It says this is a mandatory HOA and here's the fees and how we're going to negotiate that aspect of the transaction.
Right. So those are some of our set closing costs, but that doesn't include what the title agencies charge, or I guess in attorney states.
Right. What an attorney fee is going to be. They have to do an investigation of title.
Yeah.
And check and verify the chain of title all the way through. Ours, if it's an attorney who's doing the work and they don't have an assistant who they can charge a reduced rate for.
Right.
it could all be billed at $350, $375, $400 an hour.
Yep.
And if it takes a couple of hours even.
And did you never owned in Ohio, right? Because you had left.
No, I never owned Ohio.
So Gil and I had the two different houses in Ohio. And, Dan had bought the one that we lived in on Miller Street in Fremont. Ohio was an attorney state. I think it still is an attorney state. And I wasn't doing real estate at the time. So none of this conversation made any sense. It just was what it was. And so, as a new homeowner, I just went along with it. And I believe at that point, we actually met with the attorney, and then the other people met with the attorney. And I think we passed keys and stuff right then. I don't remember. It's been so many years, but it's entirely different now.
It just was part of the cost of owning a home.
Right.
In Texas, when people are relocating here, because Texas, like Florida, has no state income tax. So the way the government is funded in Texas is property taxes.
Mm.
So our millage rate is generally higher and can be a pretty heavy sticker shock.
Right.
To someone who's coming from another state where they have an income tax, so property tax is less.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, look at this. And it's like, yeah, but guess what? Every paycheck you get,
you don't have to
pay this.
Yeah.
And you said escrow fees. And do you have separate escrow fees and title fees? And when I say that, I guess that's title insurance.
No, we have the title company that does the research to make sure that you have clear title to sell. And then we have the escrow company that's managing the process. They're all kind of rolled into one on the document. But that can even include the money that it costs to send it down to the recorder's office, right?
Right. You've got your filing fees and courier fees. And the one that I always laugh at is the attorney fee. The attorney who charges both parties in the transaction that, hey, we've reviewed all these documents. They look really good. You owe us $350. And oh, by the way, we didn't represent you either. So don't come back to us if something we find out is wrong. And that's why we are the people that are considered to have the fiduciary responsibility in transactions. Do you review all of your closing disclosures?
Do I?
Yes.
Typically, yeah. Do I look at them with a fine-tooth comb? Yeah.
We discussed the fact that if you've gone through a transaction once before,
yep,
it's now more familiar to you.
Correct. Yes.
So you may not spend as much time in detail on a second Correct. Or a third or someone who's a fourth transaction in, because it's like, okay,
they know
really nothing's changed here. This is still what we're doing.
Right.
But those kind of fees, state of Texas, state of Arizona, then become negotiable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Our contracts, it's very, very specific. Arizona contract is one of those ones where every single line has a number next to it, right?
Correct.
So you can go down and say line 76.
Yes. Yeah.
And see and talk somebody through it.
Right.
Texas contracts are not that way.
Oh.
It is paragraph 1, A, B, C, D, and then there could be a sub underneath it. So paragraph 12 is where we talk about, in addition to everything else, here's what the seller is agreeing to negotiate and pay in concessions to the buyer in this transaction. And it's 12A1B is the blank that you fill in.
That already makes my brain crazy.
Right? 12A1B, and here's the number.
Wow.
And what's that number going to be?
And there are things that occur. For instance, you might have negotiated a home warranty as part of it. And the home warranty that you negotiated was up to $750.
Right.
And then the buyer decided, they want an extra refrigerator, air conditioner, something covered.
Sprinkler system, the fountain in the...
So now the warranty that's ordered is $775 instead of $750. But the seller only agreed to pay $750. So now part of that checking of the closing disclosure is to see if those dollars are divided up correctly on the document.
And if something like that goes into effect and you're representing the buyer, who ends up paying that fee? The additional.
Can people hear me raise my hand? Yes.
your hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So those are the things that looking at the closing disclosure in advance. And I told you that I just had one where it's a seller carryback and they have to pay it off in just a few months. And they said, we're not going to pay additional deductions for insurance and taxes when by November 1st, we own this house anyway. And the seller's like, yeah, you're right. Because they're already prepaid for a year of insurance and had to insure the seller that's carrying them back too. So.
And recent transaction that I was in just closed. The owners had decided they weren't going to pay their 2023 property taxes.
Oh.
So, yes, there technically was a tax lien on it.
Yeah.
But my buyer wanted the property so much that we agreed to pay. Now, it was a vacant lot. But it was a vacant lot that actually had river access.
Okay. I remember you talking
to the river.
Yeah.
And it was worth it to him.
Right.
To make sure he won, because here's this property that's been on the market for almost the full year.
Yep.
And suddenly it ends up in a multiple offer situation. There were actually 3 other people. She had lowered the price. She, the seller, had lowered the price. And suddenly it got interest and we ended up competing against 2 others.
Wow.
So you just never know. Now, the context of all this, aside from those costs that we just were talking about,
right?
We looked at some of the additional numbers on this spreadsheet. And yes, me more than you, because I actually took the numbers from a digital platform and converted them into a spreadsheet so that I could sort and do what I wanted to with the numbers instead of having to look at it just in 1 through 50 sequence based on the state you pay the most money in, which was New York, and the state you paid the least in, which was West Virginia. Part of the reason West Virginia was so low is because it also has the lowest median home value.
Right.
Of only $123,000.
Wow.
Median.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean.
Wow.
We use averages and medians a lot in our industry when you kind of say, hey, what's going on? And it's like, well, the average is this and the median is that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we looked at on this that I looked into further is some of the numbers just didn't make sense to me, especially when I adjusted it. So initial way this was sorted was saying, here's the most expensive, highest closing cost you pay in the country, down to the bottom. So then I sorted it and said, well, who's got the highest percentage? And according to what they had, the highest percentage that you pay in terms of closing costs, Texas goes from being number 12 to number 1. Mm-hmm. But that percentage is based on what I consider to be an erroneous median home value, because they had the median home value at $187,000
for the state of Texas.
For the state of Texas.
Right.
Now, Texas, second biggest state in the country. Alaska, number 1.
Yep.
But I looked at these numbers were based on 2023. So I looked at San Antonio Board of Realtors. What was our median price for the entire year 2023? And the actual number is $335,000. Yet, according to this, the Texas number is $187,000.
And that doesn't include Austin, Dallas, Houston.
How can these be off $150,000 or $250,000 in value? It just didn't make any sense.
So the percentage piece may be right, but the average or median home value doesn't make sense.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we know there's costs. We know there's dollars.
Yeah.
When you do that shift, New Mexico becomes number 2. And they were 15. What's interesting is when you take it back around to sorting this by the median home price.
Yeah.
Number 1 on the list on median home price is the state of Hawaii. $636,000 is the median home price for a house in Hawaii.
Wow.
But it's the lowest percentage. So it goes from being number 1, if you sort it based on the median price of the house, and number 50 based on the amount you'll pay for the closing cost for the transaction.
I noticed that on
less than 1%. It goes from one end of the numbers to the other.
Maybe they're making enough at less than 1% that they don't need it to be 2 or 3%.
Maybe.
Like however we're paying, you know this, and maybe we've talked about it in other episodes, that our brother Dan had bought 2 or 3 homes here in Tucson, and we flipped them, right? And every time we do that, he complains about the title fees. The people at the title company know that my brother Dan's going to complain about the title fees, because in the state of Kansas, where he lives, it's like not even close to what you pay here, especially as a flip, because even if you get a discount, if you resell it in a certain amount of time, you're like double paying those things, I can't remember. I would have to ask him again, but let's just say it's $300 to $500 in Kansas, and then it's $2,000, $2,500 here for all the costs. And he's like, "What do they do in Arizona?
Outrageous.
What do they do in Arizona?"
A lot more real estate than in Kansas, which is why you're looking in this market, right?
Yeah. So in Tucson, I looked up our stats, and I just kind of did it through April of this year because I wanted to know, where we were at through April of this year.
Right.
They break it down into the list price, the sold price, and then they have what's active, what's median, what's sold. And for the listing right now, listing prices are active. Those that are available is $395. The new ones on the market are at $379. So they're coming in a little bit lower. And the sold are at $365. So just like we have been through the many years you and I have been doing this together, we tend to be just ever so slightly higher than you and you guys. And we just simply, the inventory of under 100,000 barely exists, and probably is a fix-up, and probably outside the outskirts of town, and and things like that. So it doesn't surprise me that we're a little bit lower. We do have, and the other thing that's changed is, do you know what your average days on market is right now?
Well, I went through the first quarter. I didn't look at it.
Okay. So what was it?
Through April. I looked at the first quarter, and it was 62 days on market.
And ours is 52.9, but we've been saying 60. So what was a minute a couple of years ago, it was on the market for a minute. And then, 30 days. And that's what's creating the variation in the median sales price too, right? Because sellers, their neighbors sold it in a week. So they're going to put theirs on the market for the same price. Only that week was in January or February, and it's entirely different now.
The market is constantly changing.
Yep. Well, for me, it's a little gut wrenching, because I used to feel like I was really good at, I guess what we do is a little bit like an appraiser, but not quite the detail, right? We have to figure out, as realtors, what we think the value is of someone's home. Right. And I used to feel really confident in doing that. And I simply am not as confident right now. I feel a little bit like it's throwing darts at a dartboard. And I don't like that feeling, I have one coming on the market that when I walked up to their home 4 years after they bought it, based on everything in the neighborhood, I thought maybe 650. I went inside and I thought, holy cow, it's probably 750. They put a lot into it because they didn't expect to move. So nothing was done. Am I allowed to say half-assed? Because I think our dad would have said that. Yeah. Anyway, nothing was done poorly. It was all done so well, but it's going to be one of the expensive ones in the neighborhood. So either someone will absolutely see that and appreciate it, or they're going to say, oh, that's kind of high for the neighborhood. I don't know. It's an interesting guesstimating right now, in my humble opinion.
It is, because what's true today, I know you've looked at it. And if you do it have you had any where the listing's taken a little bit longer than you expected to get it on the market?
Oh, I had one that just closed May 1st, and I thought it would sell in January. Yep.
No, I'm talking about from the time you had that first listing appointment to when you actually got it on the market. So you go in there and you had done your market analysis.
Oh, yeah.
And then it takes too much to get it on market. And then suddenly you go back and it's like, okay, we're going to need to list at.
Yep.
2 months ago, you said it was worth this.
I have one of those right now. It's at 675, and I think it should be 625. And I've told them that. And so far, we haven't changed it. And they're not people that have to have the money tomorrow, but we've been on the market between 4 and 5 months now. Yeah. Yeah.
Price and location, right?
Yep. Price, location, interest rates, timing.
So in your numbers, when you looked at it, how many units have you sold through your board? Can you tell that number?
Me personally?
No. How many total? If the median is that like 367, can you tell how many houses it sold?
I could, but I haven't looked. So
okay.
Yeah.
So for us in the first quarter, we were just under 29,000 total units closed.
Wow.
To get to that 337 median.
I'm looking at numbers. I'm looking at how many have sold in different years. I could add them all up. I don't want to do that right now.
Ain't gonna do that kind of math. I heard you.
No, it starts at 0 and it goes to like 5 million. It's a whole lot of adding up numbers.
Well, the report that I've got lists, how do we come up with a 337.9 as a median price? 28% of the houses sold between 200 and 299,000. An additional 25% sold for 300 to 399,000. 54% of the market in San Antonio was that price range between 200 and 400,000. Then you've got the fringe and the outliers.
I'm looking at pending. I'm trying to see between the pending and what the new listings. Where is my solds? I don't have really easy access to that. I have new ones. And pending in the price ranges, but I didn't print out the solds. I'm sorry, you said fringe and outliers, and that sounded like a festival in Scotland.
The fringe and outliers. I thought you said that the market was kind of tight over $1 million right now too.
It very much is. Yeah, because I have that one listing that is we were at 1.4 and we took it to 1.359. And this month, 2024, there are 4 that are pending. In 2023, there were 2 at this point. And so far, year to date, there are 19 that have sold, in a city of several million, where in the category, let's see, pending, let's say at our median price, year to date, 575 are pending that were between 300 and 350, and 638 were last year. So when you say that, there's 19, very different ballgame, very different.
Yes,
arena,
it
right?
is. So that's why we work with medians and averages, and we just know that there's that bell curve, right?
And a reminder that what you see on a website nationally may or may not be the whole story, which to me is like getting your news from Facebook, kind of.
Well, getting your news from any place. And then I was listening to something the other day where it's like people will throw around, we Googled it. Like that's the authority, and that whatever shows up on the Googler.
I could be one of those people. So
like, hey, I Googled it. It can't be wrong.
Yeah. All right, Eric, what do you think? You ready to take us out for the day?
I am ready to bring this one to conclusion. And we then want to thank everybody for listening, joining us as we have reflected on the markets and what goes into the cost for a buyer to close on a property. There's a reason we recommend you work with a professional real estate agent. We're the ones who do this day in and day out. It's where we live.
I did air quotes for those of you not watching.
That there's a language, there's a familiarity. It's much easier for us to go through it, look at it, and help explain it and identify what may or may not make sense. And we didn't even get into Zestimates.
That's a whole nother game.
That's another whole game. So as we conclude this episode, please keep in mind that our goal is to communicate, educate, entertain, and connect with you, our listeners. We're both real estate agents with Keller Williams. Donna's with Keller Williams Southern Arizona. I'm with Keller Williams Heritage. She's in Tucson. I'm in San Antonio. We also have connections across the country and around the globe. So if you need an agent somewhere else, reach out, let us know. Let us help connect you with a perfect real estate agent to help you find a home, to create lasting memories and create your wonderful life. Remember, maybe simple. It ain't always easy. Until next time, I'm Eric.
And I'm Donna.
And we are Real
Siblings. Yay.
Every time I think about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah, yeah.
I'm Annabelle, and I want to thank you for investing your valuable time in listening to Real Sibling. It Ain't Easy. I hope you found this episode informative and enjoyable. There are several ways you can support this podcast with my Grandpa Eric and Aunt Grandma. Please take the time to like, follow, and subscribe. Additionally, leave them a 5-star rating along with a review on your preferred podcast platform. The final thing I would ask is that you recommend this podcast to a friend, a family member, or an associate. Your engagement is critical to their ongoing success, and they look forward to connecting. Check out the show notes Grandpa put together with their contact information, including emails, phone numbers, and website. And remember, the Real Siblings look forward to hearing from you.